Now, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Gwen Miller and Ms. Kalista Pepper, who will share their Alzheimer's journey with us.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Gwen Miller, the principal of Glen Ellen High School in Henrico County.
And I'm Kalista Pepper, a junior at Glen Ellen.
We are both honored and humbled to stand before you this morning to share our story, which we will do chronologically, beginning with Kalista.
5 years ago, when I was in 7th grade, my great-grandmother died. I did not know much about her life or what she stood for. I really only knew two things: that she was my grandfather's mother, and that she had lived with Alzheimer's for 20-some years. About a year before she passed, my mom and I had gone to visit her in Indiana. Part of me wishes I hadn't gone because it was one of the most despondent sights my 12-year-old eyes had ever seen. My great-grandmother, who I've been told was a very poised and proper lady, was lying stiff in a hospital bed with children's toys surrounding her. Her arms were crossed over her eyes remained fixated on the ceiling, and her body was limp and pale. The Alzheimer's had paralyzed this woman that was lying helplessly before me. I distinctly remember the pungent smell that lingered throughout the whole house. I've never been in a morgue, but that is what I imagine when I remember that smell: death and decay. Like I said, it was a pitiful sight. It did wonders on my mental state to see her living, but not really living like that. It pained me to have to imagine a life like that. It pained me to see somebody related to me going through that. More importantly, it pained my great-grandmother to live like that, and it pained my great-grandfather to care for her in such a futile state. I have never been a very religious person, but I remember going back to my aunt's house and praying that night. I prayed that I would never see anybody go through that again. My grandfather, Thomas A. Smith, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years ago. He is 70 now, and his mental state is worsening rapidly. Alzheimer's has made me lose faith in things I used to believe in. It has cost my family, my great-grandmother, and now my grandfather. It is unfortunate that he has been plagued by the disease at such a young age, especially since now should be his time to live, to travel, to be happy, and to not have to worry about anything. Rather, he has to give that up, and his wife, Marcia Smith, has to give up her life as well to care for him. My grandfather's life has been devoted to caring for others selflessly. He used to do everybody's taxes: his parents, his wife's parents, my mom's, and his own. He was always doing that sort of thing, helping others out of the goodness of his heart and expecting nothing in return. When my grandmother's parents were dying, he would go with her to Kentucky frequently to help them out. When his own parents were dying, he would go to Indiana as often as possible to aid them in whatever way. My second cousin, his nephew Nick, died in 2004, and he was there holding hands and taking care of everything that he could. It wasn't until the passing of my grandmother's sister last year when it became apparent to me, and the rest of my family, I think, that he was the one that needed to be cared for. He had spent all of his life helping other people. He gave away his own life to make sure that his family and his friends were taken care of. To me, it is ludicrously unfair that my grandfather does not get to live the rest of his life the way he should be able to and the way he helped others to because of a disease, because of Alzheimer's. As a kid, my cousins and I would make plays. In the basement of my grandparents' beach house is where we wrote, directed, and produced the Oscar-winning shows. It was a summertime tradition for us kids to congregate downstairs and conjure up our next award-winning idea for a play. Unfortunately, though, as all actors do, we would have fights. Loud, aggressive, violent fights. Generally over who got to play what role and whose title was best fitting. But when we fought, we would cause such a ruckus that my grandfather would storm down those stairs and say, "What's going on down here?" Man, those were the scariest words I ever heard growing up. My cousins and I would immediately stop whatever we were doing to quickly explain to our grandfather that we weren't doing anything worthy of his supervision or concern. He would say, "Mm-hmm," and stomp back up the stairs. The only thing sure to stop our bickering was my grandfather and the fear that he could get us into serious trouble with our parents. Looking back, I'm thankful for his frightening words, because without them, who knows if we would have ever finished our plays. I'm sorry for my younger cousins, though. stop them from arguing over whatever it is their summertime tradition will be. I am sorry for them because they do not get to see the same strong, powerful man that I grew up with and loved. They will only have memories like the ones I have of my great-grandmother, and for that I am sorry. I stand before you asking for a change. I started at school with Dr. Miller and my peers, and now I am here. I need a reason to gain back my faith and hope. I need to believe that there are other people fighting for a change. You are that reason. You are the other people fighting for a change. For my grandfather, for my younger cousins, for my friends, for my school, for Dr. Miller, and for all of you, I hope that we will soon see the end of Alzheimer's.
When Kalista was sitting at my conference table talking to me about her desire to increase awareness at our school regarding Alzheimer's and good brain health, I remember thinking that most juniors are focused on three things: driving, friends, and their grade point average. Instead, I was sitting there looking at a young lady with a laser focus on something very important to her, but not about her. She was thinking of her great-grandmother, her grandfather, and everyone inflicted with this debilitating disease. I told her that her idea was great and worth pursuing, and explained the process for starting a new club, which included finding a staff member to be an advisor. We chatted about some of the activities that she could do during the 2017-2018 school year to increase awareness on campus. She went to class, and I remember thinking that the meeting with her made my day. It's students like her that make me fully aware that our future is in good hands. A few days later, on October 11th, I took my father, Edmund Dajinski, for a 4-hour memory test. I kept telling myself that my father's memory was just fine and had occasional lapses merely because of his age, which is 81. I kept telling myself that he had difficulty keeping up with conversations because he couldn't hear. He wears hearing aids in both ears, so I always thought that his lack of connecting the dots during conversations was because he couldn't hear bits and pieces. I kept telling myself that his difficulty walking was because of old age. However, I couldn't understand why, because he exercised every day of his life. So I kept telling myself that taking my dad for a memory test was just a step that needed to be taken according to his family doctor. I was thinking that it was like any other medical test that we do, just to make sure that everything is fine. 2 weeks later, I got home late from a school event and called my mother, like I do every evening. She was crying and shared the news that my dad was in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, and the doctor told him that he couldn't drive anymore. I told her that I would visit after school the next day. I remember barely sleeping that night because I kept thinking about how my dad took such good care of us. Since moving to Virginia from Pennsylvania 15 years ago, my mother never drove. I knew that she never paid a bill or pumped gas. I realized that the tables just turned very quickly on my mother, and I would have to figure out how to help both of them. I knew that I had a whole lot to learn. The instructional leader in me felt suddenly at a loss. I went to school with a lot of sadness and uncertainty in my heart. I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know, which isn't a good feeling. During a morning class change, Kalista walked by, and I told her about my dad's diagnosis and that I had so much to learn so I could help him. She immediately told me about the Alzheimer's Association and about all of the good resources that they had, and she recommended that I go there. She even told me that the office was nearby in Innsbruck. It was a Friday. I left school at 4:35, knocked on the door at 4:50, and nobody answered. When I started to walk away, a nice lady opened the door and invited me in. I told her that I knew it was late on a Friday and I completely understood if they were closed, but she insisted that I enter. I explained why I was there, and she took me back to Nancy Lentz, who smiled, listened, and gave me 2 sets of many pamphlets along with the names of books to read. I was crying when I hugged Nancy before leaving. I then went to Barnes & Noble to purchase the book, The 36-Hour Day, for my mom to read. I went to my parents' home and started a difficult journey. The next day, while my husband Marty drove us to the cross-country state championship, I read all of the literature that I got at the office. I read much of it out loud as I was crying. I was crying because I discovered that I had missed the signs that were evident years ago. In 2008, when I was in the middle of writing my doctoral dissertation, I remember being frustrated and venting to my parents while having dinner at their house. My dad left the table, came back, and spread out a map of Poland on the table. He told me when I completed my doctorate, he would take me on a tour of Poland, not if I complete it, but when I complete it, and that lit a fire under me. During the summer of 2010, just he and I went on our journey through Poland. And I noticed that he flapped his left foot when he walked. His gait was different. He wiped out, walking up the steps made of stone at the post office, and I thought that he had broken his arm. I had to assist him when we walked down the many stairs in the salt mine in Krakow. And then, each night, I watched him on his knees as he organized his suitcase for hours. I came home and told my husband that I discovered that my father was elderly. The signs of Alzheimer's were right there in front of me in the country of our family roots, but I didn't know it. I was completely ignorant. Had I been aware, I could have gotten my father diagnosed and put on medication much earlier, and I could have prepared my mother. My father's decline has been rapid and really quite hard to believe. He refers to my husband Marty as Robert and asks my mother who the nice lady is who was always with Robert. He tells us stories about his day and about the many people in the house that aren't true, which is so hard on all of us. He has fallen several times and has fractured his spine in 2 places, which led to surgery. Of course, he argues with us that he doesn't want to use the walker because he has never fallen. In addition to how he is suffering because of the illness is the irony. My father is a pharmacist. He worked for Abbott Laboratories for 36 years as a pharmaceutical representative. Growing up during my winter break each year, he would take me to work with him, and we would travel from hospitals to pharmacies to doctors' offices, and I would hear him talk about different drugs and how they could help people. He would also work in pharmacies, and I have vivid memories of him talking so nicely to people about the prescribed drugs they were receiving. He devoted his entire professional life to helping people get better by taking the right medication, but now there is nothing to cure him. Kalista organized a meeting at school with folks from the Alzheimer's Association to discuss her many ideas. It was at that meeting that I met Sandy Grady, Marie Calindo, and Jeff Baldwin, and they explained to me that Alzheimer's awareness is 20 years behind. I sat there learning so much from one of my students. The tables were turned, and I really appreciated it. This really made me think. I know all about early detection, early cure regarding breast cancer. I am aware of what to do. I know what to do to catch cervical cancer and colon cancer early. I know what to do and what not to do to take care of my heart, but no one has ever taught me how to take care of my brain. I didn't know that Alzheimer's kills more than breast and prostate cancer combined. I didn't know that since 2000, deaths from heart disease have decreased by 14%. However, deaths from Alzheimer's disease have increased by 89%. I looked at Kalista and told her that I will be the advisor of the new club. Kalista gave me reason to hope that we can increase Alzheimer's awareness and raise money for more research to find a cure. And I am now passionate about this. Last month, Jeff, Kalista, and I met again and discussed the possibility of having a lesson about good brain health taught by the Alzheimer's Association staff to our students next year. Since then, I have received approval from the Henrico County Public School health and PE specialist to do this as a pilot in 10th grade health. Tina Thomas, the Director of Programs and Services, has already emailed us a presentation that we are all working on. This is a small start, but at least it's a start.
You are already sitting in this room today because you have awareness. You know that there is a lot of work to be done.
You give me reason to hope that my grandsons, who are in the back of the room, understand how to take good care of their brains at an early age. I hope that there will be a cure or a vaccine so they will never get Alzheimer's like their great-grandfather or know anyone with it.
You give me reason to hope that I will not have any more family members with this disease.
According to Merriam-Webster, hope means to want something to happen to be true. But as we all know, there must often be hard work and action behind hope. When a student says to me, "I hope I passed my chemistry test," I know that this will probably happen if some studying was done. Behind our hope today is a huge call for action.
We must focus on awareness, and we must raise money for study and research. We must also increase the number of programs and services so many others are aware of all that the Alzheimer's Association can do.
As an instructional leader and scholar, I can tell you with conviction that study and research makes hopes come true. Make hopes come true.
Together, all of us have reason to hope.